Stonehenge is one of the most recognized prehistoric monuments on Earth, but most people only know it as a mysterious stone circle in a field. In reality, what stands on Salisbury Plain is the surviving core of a much larger ceremonial landscape, and every visible stone is part of a long story of planning, labor, symbolism, and social power. The monument sits in Wiltshire, England, near Amesbury, and from a distance it looks simple, upright stones with horizontal stones across the top. But that apparent simplicity hides one of the most sophisticated building projects of prehistoric Europe. To understand Stonehenge, we have to stop treating it like a single event and start seeing it as a process unfolding across many generations. It was not built in one burst by one ruler or one tribe. It evolved, was redesigned, and was repurposed over roughly 15 centuries. That means each phase reflected changing beliefs and priorities. Some generations dug earthworks, others moved stones, others altered layouts, and all of them were participating in a shared tradition that outlived any one person's memory. Stonehenge is less a frozen mystery and more a record of cultural continuity and change, carved into soil and rock. At the physical level, Stonehenge combines impressive mass with careful geometry. The outer ring was made from large sarsen stones, each around 4 meters high and weighing roughly 25 tons. These were not casually placed boulders, they were shaped and arranged to work together structurally. On top, lintel stones connected uprights into a continuous ring effect, and these joints were secured using mortise-and-tenon techniques, where a protruding peg on one stone locks into a hole in another. That is a woodworking logic translated into stone construction, and it is unusual for monuments of this era. Inside that outer architecture came smaller bluestones and then the freestanding trilithons, pairs of larger uprights capped by a single lintel. The result was layered space, with movement inward becoming increasingly formal and restricted. In design terms, Stonehenge was engineered to control sightlines, pathways, and focal points. It was durable, but it was also theatrical. People approaching it would have experienced changing perspectives, framed openings, and towering forms that communicated intention and authority. This was architecture built to endure physically and to impress psychologically. The timeline matters because it destroys the myth of a sudden, inexplicable construction. The earliest known phase begins around 3100 BC, with a circular ditch and bank forming an enclosure. That earthwork alone already signals organized labor and a decision to mark this place as special. Centuries later, major stone phases transformed that enclosure into something far more monumental. The famous Sarsen Circle appears between about 2600 and 2400 BC, while evidence suggests bluestones reached their present arrangement between roughly 2400 and 2200 BC, with possibilities that some were present earlier. In other words, Stonehenge was repeatedly revised. Layout choices were not random errors from primitive builders, they reflect evolving ritual and social goals. Think of it like a cathedral district updated over centuries, except in a prehistoric context with no writing system to narrate intentions directly. Archaeologists rely on radiocarbon dating, stratigraphy, and comparison across sites to reconstruct this sequence. While dates are refined over time, the broad pattern is consistent. Stonehenge grew in complexity over generations. That long development implies memory systems, cultural inheritance, and repeated mobilization of people and materials. It was a project society kept choosing. One of the most discussed features is alignment. Stonehenge is oriented toward the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset, and this is not a vague coincidence. Its principal axis and key viewing lines connect the monument to those annual solar events in a way that would have been visually dramatic and ritually meaningful. But alignment alone does not automatically prove a single purpose like an observatory in the modern scientific sense. It is better understood as a ceremonial calendar anchor, where specific days structured gatherings, memory, and social cohesion. Solstices are natural turning points in the year, and in farming societies seasonal transitions mattered for subsistence, symbolism, and authority. A monument that stages the sky at predictable moments gives communities a recurring focus, when to gather, when to commemorate ancestors, when to renew alliances, and perhaps when to negotiate power. The winter solstice sunset may have been especially important in a world where light's return carried emotional and practical weight. So the alignment is not just astronomy, it is social time made visible through architecture. Stonehenge let people experience cosmic order as a collective event. The burial evidence adds another layer. Human bone deposits at the site date back to early phases, around 3000 BC, and continued for centuries. That suggests Stonehenge was at least partly a funerary place from very early on. A burial function does not exclude other uses. Sacred sites often combine remembrance, ceremony, and political display. But the presence of human remains helps ground interpretation in direct archaeological evidence rather than pure speculation. If communities repeatedly return to inter or commemorate the dead here, Stonehenge may have served as an ancestral center where identity and legitimacy were reinforced. In many pre-modern societies, ancestry is political currency. Claiming connection to revered dead can justify status, land use, and leadership roles. A monumental setting amplifies that process. The dead are not hidden, they are integrated into a public, shared landscape that tells people who they are and where they belong. This perspective also explains why the site could remain important across generations despite changing architecture. Even as stones moved and layouts shifted, continuity of ritual memory around death and lineage could keep Stonehenge central. Stonehenge also cannot be understood in isolation because it stands within one of the densest concentrations of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments in England. The surrounding landscape includes numerous tumuli, earthworks, and related ceremonial sites, creating a ritual complex rather than a solitary structure. This context changes the question from what is Stonehenge for to how did this entire landscape function? People likely moved through routes, pauses, and gathering points, with Stonehenge acting as a focal node in a broader choreography of movement and meaning. Monument landscapes can encode hierarchy. Certain places are open, others restricted. Some events are public, others selective. They can also encode memory over distance, where each mound, bank, and path participates in a narrative of ancestors and territory. In that sense, Stonehenge is both a destination and a signal, visible proof that this landscape was curated and contested. The scale of surrounding construction suggests repeated communal labor over long periods, which implies institutions capable of organizing work, distributing resources, and maintaining traditions. Even without written records, the archaeology points to complex social coordination embedded in place. How do we explain the extraordinary effort of moving and erecting such massive stones without modern machinery? The answer is not magic and not simplistic brute force. It is planning. Quarrying, shaping, transporting, and positioning stones of this size requires logistics, timing, manpower, tool systems, food supply, and leadership structures that can coordinate many participants. Whether movement used sledges, rollers, lubricated tracks, or combinations of methods, success depended on repeatable technique and disciplined cooperation. Then comes construction precision. Uprights had to stand stable, lintels had to fit, and joints had to lock. The mortise-and-tenon detail shows concern for long-term integrity and controlled assembly. This was not just putting rocks upright, it was engineered monumentality. The labor itself may have had social meaning. Collective building can produce identity, hierarchy, and obligation. Participating in construction could be an act of devotion, citizenship, or alliance-making. In that framework, Stonehenge is both product and process. The finished structure matters, but so does the repeated mobilization that built it. The monument physically records a society capable of coordinating large tasks for reasons that exceeded immediate survival. Over time, Stonehenge became a symbol far beyond its original makers. In modern Britain it functions as a cultural icon, and legally it has long been protected, including scheduled monument status under 19th-century legislation. Later, it and its wider setting gained UNESCO World Heritage recognition, affirming global significance rather than merely national interest. Those modern designations are not just administrative labels. They reflect a shift from viewing ancient monuments as curiosities to treating them as shared human inheritance requiring conservation. Today, stewardship involves institutions including English Heritage, the Crown Estate, and the National Trust across the broader landscape. Preservation decisions must balance research access, visitor experience, environmental pressures, and respect for spiritual communities that connect with the site in contemporary ways. This modern chapter is part of Stonehenge's story. Each era reinterprets it. Where prehistoric communities may have used it to structure ritual time, modern societies use it to negotiate identity, heritage ethics, and public memory. Stonehenge remains active not because stones move anymore, but because meanings continue to move around it. Popular culture often swings between two extremes: either Stonehenge is dismissed as a primitive relic, or it is inflated into an unsolved supernatural puzzle. Both miss the strength of archaeological reasoning. We may never recover a single written statement saying exactly why every phase was built, but uncertainty is not ignorance. Evidence allows strong conclusions about chronology, construction methods, alignment, and funerary use, while leaving room for debate about emphasis and interpretation. The most responsible view is plural. Stonehenge likely served multiple functions that changed over time. It could be a burial place, ceremonial center, astronomical marker, and political stage without contradiction. Human societies rarely separate these domains cleanly, especially in pre-modern contexts where religion, governance, and seasonal life intertwine. So instead of chasing one dramatic answer, we should appreciate Stonehenge as a layered institution. It organized people, memory, and landscape across centuries. That complexity is not a failure to solve the mystery, it is the real discovery. The monument tells us prehistoric communities were capable of abstract planning and symbolic depth on a scale many still underestimate. When you step back, Stonehenge asks a timeless question: what do communities build when they want to outlast themselves? Its creators invested extraordinary labor into a place that would still speak after their deaths. The message was not written in words, but in orientation, stone, and sequence. Build in phases. Mark the sky. Honor the dead. Gather again. Adapt, but do not abandon the center. That pattern made Stonehenge resilient through social change and environmental uncertainty. For us, the monument is a reminder that infrastructure can be symbolic, and symbolism can be infrastructural. Shared rituals, shared spaces, and shared stories are technologies for holding societies together. Stonehenge survived because it was physically robust, but it mattered because it was culturally renewable. Generation after generation found reasons to preserve, reinterpret, and return. And that may be the deepest answer to why it was built, not for a single event or ruler, but to create a durable stage where time, identity, and belonging could be negotiated in public. In that light, Stonehenge is less a riddle from the past and more a mirror of how humans create meaning that endures. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.